This video, we're going to be discussing Rabah bar Rav Huna, the son of Rav Huna, which we talked about in a previous video. And he was a student of Rav Huna was, and of Shmuel, as we discussed. Rav Huna, Rabah bar Rav Huna, the son, was also a student of Rav, the great rabbi, the first generation Amora, which again means a rabbi who was a rabbi of the Talmud. And after his father's passing, seemingly he was the person who would take over the yeshiva, be the academy of Sura. However, Rav Chizda, his colleague, which we'll talk about in a later video, took over. Only after the passing of Rav Chizda did he become Rabba bar Rav Huna, become the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the academy, and that was in the year 309. He himself studied by Rav, which his father's teacher. We know that his marriage happened before Rav, while Rav was still alive, and so therefore, again, how old was he when he got married? Let's say if we follow the Talmudic dictum of getting married at 18, so he was a teenager at least when Rav passed away. So it makes a lot of sense that he would have studied under the tutelage of Rav himself, and in fact, many sayings are quoted by Rabba bar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, that meaning that Rabba bar Rav Huna would tell over teachings in the name of Rav, and many important teachings of Rav, the great rabbi who really studied by rabbis of the Mishnah, including Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, which we talked about in a previous video, the rabbi who compiled the Mishnah. So this was a very important part of tradition, and Rabba bar Rav Huna is quoted many times. Once, just some stories about him and his colleague slash teacher Rav Chizda. There's some stories to go about it. Once he erred in his teaching, and he erred in the halacha, and he said the wrong halacha, and Rav Chizda pointed out to him, and he went he went around town himself and said, "I made a mistake. I said that the halacha was a certain way, and then I was incorrect." And we see here his humility, willing to take the criticism and correct the thing that he had erred. Another interesting anecdote about him: one time he was in a dispute with the rabbis of the Reish Galusa, the head of the Exilarch family. Essentially, the Reish Galusa, this family, had some sort of political power. We discussed it in previous videos, and he had a dispute about some sort of halachic problem or issue in Torah study and or leadership, I guess, best way to say it. And he said to him, "Listen, I did not receive permission from you to be a rabbi. And in fact, I received it from what he said, Ava Mari, my father, my teacher, meaning Rav Huna. And he received his teachings from Rav. And he learned his teachings from Rabbi Chia, and he learned his teachings from Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the author, the compiler of the Mishnah, and therefore I don't have to listen to you." So very interesting. You kind of see this dichotomy that there was always a little bit of tension between the Reish Galusa, who had the political power, and the rabbis of the academy, who had obviously the Torah power. Even though the Reish Galusa sometimes were extremely learned, nonetheless, they wielded the political power. They had many disputes, as we've discussed in previous videos, with the rabbis of the academy. Rav Huna once was told by his father. Rabbi Rav Huna was told by his father Rav Huna that he should study by Rav Chizda, who, as we mentioned, was his kind of colleague slash teacher when he was the Rosh Yeshiva of Sura at that point. And Rav Huna said to him, "You should go study by Rav Chizda." And he said, "Listen, I went to Rav Chizda's lecture. However, I was listening to him. He was giving health advice. I don't want to get into exactly the advice, but basically he was teaching how a person should conduct himself in a healthy manner. And when his father Rav Huna heard that Rav Chizda was teaching health advice, he said, "Wow, that is for sure a good idea. Now you for sure should study for him. Now he's teaching you health advice. This is very important. Now for sure I know that this is a good idea." So Rav Chizda, and who was a student of Rav Huna, was kind of given this prominence by Rav Huna to his son. And in the end, they did indeed become close, as we mentioned. and in the beginning of this video, how he was kind of his colleague teacher, and succeeded him as Rosh Yeshiva eventually. After his passing, Rabbi Bar Huna was buried also in the land of Israel, and his son, he had a son named Rabah, who was also a great Torah scholar. So Rabbi Bar Huna, a very important rabbi and rabbi of the Talmud, as we mentioned, the son of Rav Huna, and the transmitter, a big transmitter of the teachings of Rav, the great rabbi of the first generation of Amoraim, of rabbis of the Talmud. And somebody that we study until this day. When you open a Talmud, you always find Amar Rabba Rav Huna, Amar Rav, Rabba Rav Huna said the name of Rav. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, please leave a comment. We appreciate the feedback. If I made a mistake or something I should have said, could have said, leave it in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.